Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Let's look at the plight of refugees globally as the world celebrates World Refugee Days. As of 2023, over 170 million people are displaced globally, and out of this percentage, you have 40% to be children who are less than 18, which is why it's important for us to have this conversation on a day like this. Let's begin our business of shaping policy in this regard by bringing in our in-house analyst who joins us in the studio. We have Sam Orovwuje joining us this morning. Glad to have you join us this morning.
Good morning, Femi. My pleasure to be here.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning,
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
All right. I would love us to start with this figure, which was released in 2023. You have 170 million people who are forced to leave their environment, their natural environment, globally in 2023 alone, where you have 40% of them to be children. Talk to us. How has it been of serious concern to pay attention to the plight of refugees globally?
Thank you very much indeed. The United Nations Resolution 5576 of 2001 set June 20 as a day where the plights of refugees are highlighted all over the world. The figure you just mentioned, in my view, does not represent the true status of people that are displaced globally. The figure you gave are those that have crossed international boundaries, those who have moved from one country to the other, trying to seek asylum or get a refugee status. On the other hand, you have about 72 point something million internally displaced persons across the world.
Even there are ones that are not accounted for.
No, I'm coming. Yeah. Just try to lay background. If you add that to the other figure, you're hovering around over 200 million people that are of concern in terms of displacement, that have of concern in terms of those who are still within national borders, that's internally displaced persons. Then those who have crossed international borders, you have over 117 million people. It might shock you that out of these global issues, Africa represents a greater number of the people of concern generally to the world. But what is key today, beyond highlighting the plight of refugees, is to look at the core issues in terms of drivers of conflict that has made people to try to seek a refuge status in other country. There are legal frameworks and other protocols. Maybe as we progress, we'll be able to look at them. So today is not just sufficient in terms of looking at the plight. Are the rights of refugees respected globally, particularly from the point of view where the United Nations Convention, 1951 Convention relating to the status of a refugee has not been respected by the state parties to that convention. Even an additional protocol was made in 1967. Those protocols are not respected. And even if you come to Africa, you have the ONU Convention relating to the status of refugee as well, 1969, with some amendment in terms of the protocol. So the challenge is, how do we address the drivers of conflict in terms of climate change, in terms of violence, and other elements that drive people trying to seek refuge in other parts of the world?
All right, let's backtrack a little before we talk about the plight of these refugees. Let's look at conditions that have led to the high level of displaced people or high rates of displaced people. Imagine just 110 million people being forcibly displaced by mid-2023, which you say the actual figure is more than that because there are some that are not in records. But let's even assume that's the figure, but it's quite huge. What could be the reasons for this displacement? Is it just conflict or there are other reasons?
Yes, I just tried to speak to that element, but now that you asked that question in specific, then we can address it. When people try to seek refuge, there are elements Number one, conflict. You talk about climate change. You talk about discrimination based on social or political group or membership of certain social group. There have been extension to even include some elements that are not even palatable, particularly from our culture in Africa. Sexual perversion has come into that arena as well. So the point here, one of the major driver of refugee outflow to international borders, essentially over 50%, is as a result of conflict and violence. So, and if you look at the geography in terms of how conflicts are managed across the world, is a very difficult challenge that the refugee problem itself cannot be solved in the immediate, because the overlapping drivers that creates people to live where they can no longer get the protection of their government, then they move elsewhere, try to seek asylum on the basis of what I just mentioned about nationality, race, religion, social, political group membership, which the 1951 convention appropriately defined. So, if we're able to deal with those conflicts, then there's going to be a problem in terms of addressing the refugee issue in international relation. So another element that we need to consider, look at Africa, for example. If you look at the political geography and the spatial distribution of refugees in Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo account for the largest number of people that are displaced, followed by Somalia, followed by Nigeria. And these figures are so alarming. And ought to be able to address the core elements in terms of violence, conflict, climate displacement, and all that, then the issue of today, which is the World Refugee Day, just try to highlight, underscore how the rights of refugees can be protected across the globe, remain to be seen whether it can be resolved quickly or whether the international system is paying a lip service into this major challenge in terms of human flight.
All right, let's get back to the statistics we released earlier, where we talked about over 170 million people, which, like what you said, there are a lot of people are not being accounted for. There are instances you won't have data of people who have migrated or are displaced. But according to this figure, you have over 47 million children who has also been displaced as a result of violence here and there. That's just about 40% of the number we're talking about. What do you think is the impact of that on the society? It's looking like a time bomb, like, a disaster waiting to happen if you have 47 million children, and most of them are less than 18. So what's the impact of that on the society, and what can be done to correct that trend?
The challenge here is that national governments must be responsible in a way that they're able to resolve conflict first and foremost, because the major driver of refugee outflow is essentially over 50% to 60% as a result of conflict. So first, we must encourage good governance within national boundaries, particularly in Africa. The impact on children is enormous because more often than not, where people are in flight, they try to move with their children. But the challenge on the other hand, particularly from the global north that are signatory to the convention, where people who want to claim refugee status, RSD as it's called, more often than not, a greater percentage of those who really qualify for refugee status are denied. And beyond this figure that you even talk about, there are people you call